Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is October 20th and we have a lot of interesting news. In this episode, drones are striking Russia's gas giants, and Kazakhstan is expressing concern for Russian factories, but not for the bombed children's homes and hospitals in Ukraine. Hungary is once again defending Putin. Orban is practically tearing the last shirt off his back. And Syria is leaving Putin for good. That's it. It won't happen. And by the way, it's not even clear if Assad is still alive at this point. Trump is opening a second front, now in Latin America, and is harshly accusing the president of Colombia. Meanwhile, in Russia, the church has declared war on psychics and plans to decide who is allowed to have children and who isn't. And we'll also talk a bit about the Louvre robbery. All this and more. Today's episode will have a lot of interesting things, especially if you're new to this channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. So, Kazakhstan is concerned about Ukrainian drone strikes on a plant in Orenburg. This strike happened just the other day, as reported by Bloomberg. Basically, it's a very large gas processing plant. I talked about this in yesterday's episode. And the strike on this plant caused a halt in the intake of Kazakh gas from the Karachaganak field. That is, Kazakhstan's Ministry of Energy has already stated that this could affect oil production, since the oil and gas projects of the two countries are closely connected. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed that they struck the plant in Orenburg and will continue to strike. I know I have quite a few viewers from Kazakhstan who always express their support for Ukraine, and I want to thank you very much for that. They also understand very well that they have an unpredictable neighbor who, by the way, their country is also called not real. Since coming to power, Putin has believed that northern Kazakhstan is really Russia itself, and definitely not Kazakhstan. By the way, let me remind you, Orenburg is a territory that was taken from Kazakhstan. So I have never once heard any Kazakhstani officials react in the same way as they did about that factory hit by a Ukrainian drone, or express concern, for example, about the Russian missile strike on the Akhmatet Children's Oncology Center in Kiev, or express concern about the strike on the maternity hospital in Sumy, or about the strike on the school in Kharkiv. But the only thing they're interested in is that little factory. Obviously, it's about business interests and so on. But I also want to point out that Kazakhstan plays a rather active role in helping Russia as well, in circumventing sanctions. That's why, of course, everyone is outraged. I mean, in Kazakhstan, in the government. I'm not talking about ordinary Kazakhs right now. You in the government are outraged, but for Ukraine, this is the only chance to stop the war, to deprive Putin of money for this war. That's why we have struck and will continue to strike, as our general staff has said. I think right now the armed forces of Ukraine are doing exactly the right thing. They are showing everyone who still continues to trade with or work with the Russian Federation that, and by the way, helping it to circumvent sanctions, that this carries increased risks. These are much greater risks than you imagine. You might invest 100 million, 200 million, 300 million in joint oil and gas projects. Ukrainian drones costing just a few $1,000s will come and wipe out all your investment projects. That's why it is not recommended to do business with the Russian Federation. I have no illusions that Russia will stop waging war. It will not stop. In fact, Putin will need to wage war even more so that Russians don't look around with hungry eyes, wondering why there's no food, why there's no gasoline. It's always the external enemy, so everyone is sent off to fight there. So look for other partners. The risks of doing business with Russia are seriously increasing. Well, by the way, things are really serious over there. That Orenburg Gazprom plant, after the drone attack, completely stopped accepting gas. And it's unknown when it will resume operations. What can you do? What can you do? It happens. And then there's Hungary, which likes to complain that strikes on Russian pipelines are a blow to Hungary's independence. Why be petty? Just say right away that a strike on the oil pipeline is a direct blow below the belt to Orban personally. That's probably exactly how it is. And Orban's government isn't lagging behind, they're doing their part. The Hungarian foreign minister condemned Poland for refusing to extradite to Germany the Ukrainian Volodymyr Zhuravlev, who is suspected of sabotage. Nord Stream, and a statement. Look, they're getting into everything. As soon as there's a Russian agenda somewhere, they immediately jump into it. Right away, instantly. Quoting Siarto. Poland believes that if you don't like some infrastructure in Europe, you can blow it up. By doing this, they gave permission for terrorist attacks in Europe. Poland not only released them, but also supports terrorists. This is what European rule of law has come to, wrote Siarto. And who is it that's carrying out terrorist attacks in Europe? And who is it that's launching drones into Poland? And who is setting fire to post offices? Now, the investigation has already determined that the Russian GRU is behind this. Who is it? Who is doing all this? How rat-like is their behavior, really? And, of course, the Polish foreign minister, Mr. Sikorski, couldn't stay silent, and he wrote, "No, Pyotr, when a foreign aggressor bombs your country, you have the legal right to strike back by sabotaging the aggressor's ability to finance the war." Absolutely logical. A video statement also appeared from the judge who denied the extradition of Vladimir Zhuravlev. The judge stated that the actions of those who sabotaged the pipeline were not unlawful. On the contrary, the judge said they were justified, rational, and fair. Ukrainian military personnel and everyone acting as part of the armed forces of Ukraine, including special forces, cannot be considered terrorists or saboteurs, because by defending their homeland by all possible means, they thereby weaken the enemy. So maybe there was no need to freeze Russian assets then. So, let me remind you of the chronology. Russia, with the help of the former German leadership, builds these Nord Stream pipelines. The situation there is just, well, alright, let's continue. Literally within months, just months apart, the darling of fate, former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, wins some kind of fantastic lottery. In September 2005, he signs a contract with Putin to build the Nord Stream pipelines. Just 2 months after he stepped down, 2 months later, he gets a tempting offer to join the organization, Nord Stream. And then in March of the following year, about 6 months after he gave Putin the green light for his Nord Stream project, he became the chairman of the supervisory board of this very Nord Stream. Talk about luck, right? Basically, Russia planned to use these Nord Streams to get Europe hooked, just like Hungary is now hooked and can't get off. Well, Orban, not Hungary as a whole. I make that distinction. The Hungarians and Orban's government. In other words, so that no one would even think about sanctions if Putin did something nasty, because you're all hooked on the Nord Streams. So Russia thought this through and lobbied it through Germany. Germany is demanding, bring us the culprit. Reasonable people say no, he's a hero. And that's what all reasonable people think, he's a hero. Then why doesn't anyone ask why the Nazis' oil depots were bombed during World War II, even though they weren't on German territory? For example, there was an oil refinery in Romania that supplied fuel to Nazi Germany, and the Allies came and bombed it. Why, I wonder? Right? Good question. First of all, thank you to Poland and other countries for taking the right stance. Finally, someone has started asking the right questions. If we're talking about Hungary, then the right question is this. How did it happen that Orban is basically bending all the countries of the European Union, sabotaging the decisions of everyone else, blocking anti-Russian sanctions, blocking aid to Ukraine, and lifting sanctions from Russian oligarchs? How did it come to this? He openly blackmails the entire European Union and criticizes Brussels. He doesn't like Brussels even though he's in the European Union. At the first call, he rushes to Putin. They don't share the common values of the European Union. Hungary ranks among the lowest in terms of prosperity. This is how the European Union ended up at a point where it would seem one of its weakest links is bending, twisting, and manipulating the entire chain called the European Union as it pleases. This is the stage where things went wrong. By the way, friends, let me remind you that we are currently holding an important fundraiser for our defenders, for the legendary Azov. We are raising funds for the Special Forces sniper unit of the Azov brigade, and right now they need reconnaissance drones. Believe me, reconnaissance drones in the hands of the Azov brigade's Special Forces sniper unit are a deadly combination for the occupiers. So I strongly urge you to support this fundraiser. They are currently defending in the Pokrovsky direction and have specially recorded a video addressing us, the viewers of this channel.
Слава Україні! Ми загін снайперів спеціального призначення бригади Азов. Звертаємося до Бориса Тизенгаузена та його спільноти за допомогою. Для виконання спеціальних задач наш загін потребує розвідувальних дронів. Будемо вдячні кожному і кожній. Слава нації!
Azov is a legend. Only the occupiers get uneasy at the mention of Azov. So friends, I ask you to support the real heroes. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There's Mono, Private, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. To each of you personally, I see everyone, and I want to say a huge thank you from myself and from our defenders. Thank you for supporting Ukraine. And if for some reason you don't see it, maybe some other channel put up the video in the description. I specifically made a QR code that leads to this fundraiser. I was really curious to see how the visit of the new Syrian president to Putin would end. As we expected, basically, with nothing. In other words, Putin was unable to reach an agreement with Syria regarding Russian military bases. Basically, he couldn't because Assad didn't want to hand them over. And he didn't want to hand them over because no one really knows where he is or what's happening with him. Putin definitely wasn't planning to hand over Assad, for one thing. It really is unclear how he's doing over there. Some media outlets even reported the day before that someone had tried to poison him. He was discharged from the hospital and now he's being guarded by the FSB. And I noticed that the information about Assad buying 20 apartments in the Moscow city complex, that leak happened right before the visit of the new Syrian president. Why? So basically they wrote that he lives there, that he bought 20 apartments. He uses 3 of them. He also has some little house in the Moscow suburbs, that's it. And he leads a reclusive lifestyle, playing computer games. So all of this sounded like, don't worry, he's alive. Who exactly were you trying to reassure, I wonder? When Russians say, don't worry, he's alive, it usually means things might be a lot more complicated. So, of course, no one was planning to hand over Assad. He and Putin shared too many secrets about chemical weapons, about the assistance provided, about various terrorist proxies, about Wagner PMC, about Russian troops, and much more. Basically, it would cost Putin much more if Assad started talking, especially if, God forbid, he spoke to other intelligence agencies. So for now, Putin can do without Syria and without the military bases. But who knows? With this Baltic, it feels like he plans to outlast everyone. Well, here comes Donald Trump. He tirelessly opens up a front. He's opening a second front in Latin America. In addition to the ongoing conflict with the head, the dictator of Venezuela, Maduro, which hasn't yet escalated, he harshly accused the president of Colombia of covering up the trade in illegal substances and announced the suspension of US subsidies to Colombia. So there's one thing to note there. That is, the US once again destroyed a boat carrying illegal substances and claimed that members of a cartel were on board. I saw footage of that boat that was shown. The boat was quite unusual, submersible, high speed, which led the president of Colombia to say that those were just ordinary fishermen. But they were hardly ordinary fishermen, to be honest. Like the Justice League, they're also riding on some kind of giant... They were chasing around in submarines. In general, this is already the 6th strike against submarines, and Trump directly accused that president, saying that they're actually covering up all this illegal drug trade themselves. Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. Of course, Donald Trump chose a very good direction here. That is, the fight against the illegal trafficking of banned substances, which directly affects the population of the United States. When I look at this footage, whole neighborhoods, entire neighborhoods where people come to use substances, and there they just lie around, sit. Some of them don't even look very much alive anymore. Well, in general, it's just some kind of savagery, just completely young people who are simply killing themselves this way. And it's horrifying to watch, but I would like this fight to be fundamental. I mean, blowing up a few boats on camera with drones or something like that. Showing this on TV once a week, like, look, we've stopped it. Fundamentally, it's about uncovering the chains of responsibility with real evidence and facts, exposing corrupt governments, imposing sanctions, cutting off logistics, underground laboratories, and so on and so on and so on. By the way, Trump did not rule out that a foreign operation might be carried out. So, well, in general, that's how it is. It's a very good PR move, meaning you can always show off, boom, here's 3 tons, or there was a ton, and so on. But the fundamental fight looks a little different. Although I hope that they'll finally start fighting this filth, this plague that has spread all over the world. Trump, reminds me, how many more wars do I need to end before I get the Nobel Prize? 3, let's say. And how many are there in the world right now? 2. Let's start one more then. And then end it ourselves. So sometimes Trump reminds me of that kind of behavior. Although I'm ready to eat my words if Trump suddenly comes out and says, of course we're giving tomahawks to Ukraine, of course we're imposing sanctions on those who buy Russian energy resources. But somehow I feel like we'll be waiting a long time for that. Every time I see news about the Russian Orthodox Church, I can't help but wonder, where is your bottom? Now they want to take control of magicians and psychics, as I understand it, their direct competitors. And they're saying that this issue needs to be regulated, put all of them under surveillance. And I just think about it, holding an aerial procession like the Russian Orthodox Church did, and not just once. So priests fly around in an army helicopter with icons around some settlement or important facility, so that drones don't fly there later. That for them is perfectly normal. But to predict something with cards? No, that needs to be put under control. But blessing ballistic missiles, weapons, calling the war against Ukraine sacred like Patriarch Kirill did, that's normal. But sitting next to that Chinese ball with lightning inside and, selling people on the future, that's already considered evil. Yeah. By the way, their church has gotten so actively involved in politics, and now its main focus is to get Russians to have more children for Putin, for future wars. In other words, to have more babies. They just don't know what else to come up with. Patriarch Kirill is already planning to write letters to everyone who gives birth. Also, by the way, they're now pushing an initiative that a man must also give consent for a woman to have an abortion or not. In other words, they want to legally require that without a man's consent, a woman can't terminate a pregnancy. How is that supposed to work if a crime has occurred? If it was forced? Are you supposed to get permission from the maniac in prison or something? I don't really... Although, why would they care? They've already, from prison, all of them, they pulled everyone out and sent them to the front, and then they come back as heroes. So here they are, back heroes. Basically, everything is heading toward the next stage, where the next person to give approval will be some priest, who will decide how you should live, how many children you should have, and tell you you're not doing enough. 2 kids, not enough. So tomorrow you quit your job, stop your education, women don't need that, just like one priest recently said. And that's it, you'll be giving birth, fulfill the state's quota, and only then can you focus on your career. That's where they're heading with all this. That's exactly where they're going. The Taliban banned education for women and that's it, just give birth. In fact, you can't even leave the house alone. All you can do is sit at home and keep having children.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Amid all this news, the number of people wanting to move to Russia from abroad has dropped 3-fold. I'm actually curious, who are these people? Recently they were deporting all sorts of Russian world enthusiasts from the Baltic countries. Maybe it's them? Maybe they're counting those people as wanting to move. But for some reason I've seen footage of people crying when they're sent back to Russia. How can that be? If someone from a normal country with a decent standard of living wants to move to Russia, then great, don't stop them. It means your country is cleansing itself of something, and you'll have fewer people inviting the Russian world into their midst. All the cases I know of where families from the US or Europe moved to Russia ended badly. In one case, the father of the family was sent to war. Someone lost all their savings, someone wanted to start a farm there, but that didn't work out. You're in Russia, what farm are you talking about? Goodbye. The only one who, let's say, feels fine in Russia is Steven Seagal. By the way, I never really liked him even as a kid. Such a sellout went to Russia and says things for Putin like, I could die for him, but not now, maybe some other time. I never liked his movies since childhood, because all those films like Under Siege. under siege or the siege, on deadly ground, the trap, in the trap, they were all just the same. He gave people a false sense of confidence. That you could just wave your hands around like that and supposedly beat someone. Everyone who believed in that would end up getting punched in the nose out on the street, and that was that. So Steven Seagal ruined a lot of childhoods. And also about the Louvre robbery, I had mixed feelings about it. I've been to the Louvre twice, actually. And on the one hand, there are so many movies being made about all this now. Arsène Lupin, some Ocean's 11 type stuff, Steven Seagal and so on. They're making all these films now about these cool heists. And when you watch it on screen, wow, they're so clever. Look at all the things they can do, how they fooled everyone. And then you think, well, this is basically the same thing, just like in the movies. This was like real-life Hollywood right here. They pulled off the heist with a getaway ladder in 7 minutes, changed into museum security uniforms. In general, they pulled it off very professionally, broke in. But then you read the details, like, for example, one of the pieces of jewelry broken was thrown away. So these were Napoleonic jewels. And you think, well, obviously they must have then, obviously you can't just sell jewels like that. They probably ended up in some private, super private collection somewhere. But they could just melt them down and take out the stones, and that's that. And you think, well, in movies it all feels different somehow. But in general, taking what doesn't belong to you is not recommended, neither in movies nor in real life. And let's remind that bald-headed jellyfish for whom Ukrainian soil will become a bone in the throat about this. Believe me, Ukraine will be the nail that pins that vampiric creature in its coffin so it never gets out again. And as for you, friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Subscribe to the channel, don't forget. And let's support Azov. The link and details are in the description of this video. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.